Let's go ahead and start our mini lesson and unit on linear perspective. This is a device that we can use to suggest visual depth in space. So what we're going to do is first just look at this illustration. This comes from a video game. So artists work on various different kinds of projects, and one of your career paths, if you are really interested in the arts, is an animator. And so we've had several students go into video game production. And so when you look at this very old still, I apologize for how old this is, but I really do love the image, so I've kept it. Look at how the game modeler has shown space. What are the different things that they have done to make it look like it goes visually back into space? So take a few moments on your worksheet, on the little bubble off to the right side on the worksheet, and go ahead and fill out the different things that you can see. These are techniques you may have used in your still life as well. What I wanted to show you through this example is there's many different ways to show space. One of the things that you can do is you can just use overlap. This is something we did in our still life. This car is in front of this alleyway. It's in front of this wall. It's in front of this kind of garbage on the side of the street. And so that suggests space. Another thing is you might notice that there's a Mack truck in the background. Well, you know, a Mack truck is a lot larger than a sports car, but because it's farther away, it appears smaller. Also, you might notice that the amount of detail changes. There's a lot of detail in the foreground, and then as things get farther away, right, you can barely make out the reading on that exit sign. And so you can see that details get less and less. We can use linear perspective, and that's what we're going to be practicing for the next 4 to 5 days. Linear perspective is where you have lines that go back into space, go to a single point on the horizon. So this horizontal line is our horizon line, and then the windows and the roof lines of this kind of maybe like, it's almost like Wacker Drive in Chicago. It's like an underground road. All of these lines lead back to a vanishing point on both sides that lead to this space right here. And you can see that this creates these panels of these doorways that get smaller and smaller as they get farther away. The last device that the artists used was what we call atmospheric perspective. I use this a lot in my painting course, where colors are more vivid and rich in the foreground, so in the front, and then as they get to the background, they tend to get lighter, hazier, and often grayer. So you can see that kind of greenish, bluish hue in the background. That helps create that illusion of depth. So I just wanted to show you some examples from history to see how the way we depict space has changed. The ancient Egyptians just kind of cluttered their imagery, filling things in rows, but really didn't show a lot of visual depth. Even size didn't really matter. This is an Assyrian piece, and you can see how they just layered things in the foreground and had very simple background. So there's very shallow depth. This is an example of early Romans, and sometimes they would mix your point of view. So you might have like an aerial view of a pond and then the profile view of a tree. So it didn't always make sense. But one of the things the ancient Romans started to notice is what we call intuitive perspective. We did this when we drew boxes or did some of our still life objects. We can see as things go back into the distance that lines start to go back in a diagonal. Now, sometimes we can eyeball this and we're accurate. This one is not. This is angling the wrong direction. But most of the time you can see that they saw that things are angling back towards the right side and going down. This one's pretty close to linear perspective. All the details on this architecture go back to a single point. Now, if this was true linear perspective, these other 6 areas would also go back to that single vanishing point that we have in the center. In the Middle Ages, we can see how space was depicted inaccurately. It almost looks like this table is flying up, right? It's like we see too much of it. It's kind of tilted. It's like it's being thrown by the angel there. It has many different vanishing points as well and has lines going back in various directions. It wasn't until 415 that a sculptor, architect, artist named Brunelleschi created an experiment where he drilled a hole in a painting. Excuse me, he drilled a hole in a painting, and then he used a mirror. And so what he did was he was able to experiment with this accurate drawing of Florentine baptistry, that lines that go back into space line up with a vanishing point. And so once he discovered this and wrote about it, it was kind of passed along Italy, and we start to see a lot of artists using single vanishing points to create space. This is a flat painting by Masaccio, but you can see how all of the architectural details of this flat wall, it looks like it's another niche or aisle in a church, all seems very believable in space based on linear perspective, as well as all that great detail he added. You can see how objects get smaller and smaller as they go closer and closer to the vanishing point. So to create depth, we can change size, we can have overlap, and we can have depth where lines go back into space diagonally. It wasn't until the late Renaissance and a German artist figured out that not all lines go back to the same point. He figured out that sometimes things are tilted. So the interior of this room all goes back to a single vanishing point. However, notice that crooked chair. Because the chair is not aligned to the wall, it has its own separate vanishing point. Often my advanced students have to do this when they're depicting a room setting because not everything's always perfect. Sometimes it feels really artificial and fake if everything aligns perfectly. So I'm going to have you go ahead and fill out your linear space worksheet. Please make sure that you add your vocabulary as you are responsible for understanding the concepts through the demonstration and through discussion. So the first one I would like you to write down is horizon. So notice you're just filling in one section of the definition. The horizon is your eye level. Now, often we think about the horizon being where the sky and the land meets, and sometimes that's the case for linear perspective, but not always. In terms of linear perspective, your horizon is where your eye level is. So it all depends on your location. Are you on the top of a skyscraper? Are you at the bottom of the skyscraper? Are you in the middle of the building? That's all going to determine how you see the lines going back into space. The next one is the vanishing points. The vanishing points are a point on the horizon where diagonal lines converge into space. So they go back into space. It's so far away that eventually you'll no longer be able to see beyond that point, hence the name vanishing point. Feel free to pause at any time if I'm going too fast. In 1 point perspective, you have 1 point on the horizon. So you'll have a horizon line, and then on that horizon, somewhere there will be a single point. In this type of drawing, you would use horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines. So your horizontal lines are going to be your tops and bottoms of boxes. Your vertical lines are going to be the height or how tall the box is. And then the depth will be how deep it goes back to the vanishing point. And that's a key that you'll always remember. Most of the time when you're drawing a diagonal line, it will always go back to your vanishing point. This is a really easy trick that you'll have to just keep in mind. A lot of times people get confused because they're using a ruler and they get freaked out because they hate using rulers and they hate measuring. But really our ruler is just a straight edge, helping us line things up to our vanishing points. In 2 point perspective, we'll have a horizon and there will be 2 points on that horizon. You'll only use vertical and diagonal lines in this type of perspective. So your verticals are going to be your height, and your diagonal lines will go to the right or to the left to your vanishing points. Now, we won't be practicing 3-point perspective, but I'll show you some examples today. This will have 2 points on the horizon, and then depending on your point of view, you'll have either a vanishing point above or below the horizon. In this type of perspective, you only have diagonal lines. There are no longer horizontal or verticals unless they align perfectly with a horizon line or perfectly in the center of the vanishing point. So here's your illustration of 1-point perspective. If you flip over your worksheet, there may be an example of this. Feel free to draw along in the bottom of the sheet if that helps you. So you're going to have a horizon. I always use my ruler to draw this out. And then sometimes I use a reference point, or if I'm sitting out in reality and I'm drawing, I try to figure out where I see the lines going back to determine where I'm going to place this vanishing point. So you're going to place your vanishing point on the horizon, and then you're going to draw a rectangle. It can be a rectangle, it can be a square, it really doesn't matter for this exercise. And then what I'm going to have you do is you're going to take corners of your box and you're going to line them up to your vanishing point. Notice that the lines are going to, right? They're going to. You need to line the corners up with your ruler and go to the vanishing point directly. Do not freehand this. Now, in order to complete the box, you would draw a horizontal line, and this horizontal line mimics the front horizontal line, so that is the width of the box. And then you're going to use a vertical line that should be parallel to the height. And then you'll have a 3-dimensional looking box. Feel free to pause if you want to sketch this out on the bottom of your worksheet. In 2-point perspective, you're once again going to have a horizon, and then on this horizon, you're going to have 2 vanishing points. We typically put them on either side of the paper. Then you're going to start with a vertical line. And then after that, you're going to take diagonal lines to the left and to the right. So you will take the top and the bottom of the line and line it up to the right vanishing point, the top and the bottom of the line and line it up to the left vanishing point. Then you would use vertical lines to put the ends of the box in. And then you would align the corner on this top right side, and you're going to take it to the opposite vanishing point. So notice how it lines up to the left. The other one will line up to the right. And there you have a 3-dimensional looking box. One of the keys to remember that on 1-point perspective, you're going to see the front of the box, and it's going to be rectangular. It's going to have 90-degree angles. That's when you know if there's lots of squares and rectangles that it's 1 point. If it's 2-point perspective, this is where the corner of something is closest to you. So notice how the corner of it is closest to you, and there'll be limited amounts of 90-degree angles. In 3-point perspective, which we're not going to practice, but feel free to sketch along if you like, you're going to have a horizon line. You're going to have 2 vanishing points, and then you're going to put one either above or below. You can see I threw the third one in the A of linear at the very top. So here you would draw the height or the depth. Sorry, went backwards here. Notice how this line here lines up to the vanishing point. And then the top and the bottom of that line goes to the left and the right. And they all line up and go to different vanishing points. So all of these lines line up with one of the 3 vanishing points. This is an example of 3-point perspective of someone's bedroom. Notice how the height of the rooms are tilted to a vanishing point, and because I can see them going wider, I know that the vanishing point is actually low in this picture. The last few definitions that we have are based on your point of view. This is going to help you decide what part of the building you see. So in this animation or 3D model, you can see that I see the roof. So because I can see the roof, we call this the bird's eye. It's as if I'm a bird floating above the horizon, looking down upon the building. A worm's eye view is where your point of view is very low. This is what we typically see when we're in a city and we're looking around skyscrapers, and the buildings tend to look like they're getting smaller and smaller as they get farther away. So what you're going to be doing for the next few days is you're going to be drawing basic shapes. So you're going to be drawing and following along with the videos. Feel free to pause as you need to so that you can play as you watch these videos. It will do you no good to watch the whole thing and then try to remember all of the steps. Do it with the video. So you're going to draw 9 boxes, and then on those boxes, you're going to try to figure out how to do these different details. And I said, try to figure out. I'm going to do it with you. So you'll just have to draw along and then try to remember the steps as you move forward into the future. So you're going to do boxes on boxes. You'll do doors and openings. You'll do circles. You'll do lettering, and you'll do checkerboard. These are some of those basic details that you might have to do if you were going to do a building, either interior or exterior. Then lastly, you'll practice 2-point perspective. In 2-point perspective, you're going to be drawing 3 structures below, on, and above the horizon. And then you're going to learn how to do different kind of roofs, how to alter and change the shape of the building, how to make doorways, how to make bricks, entryways, windows, etc. And so this whole exercise will probably take 4 to 5 class periods. So when I say these exercises, I mean the 1-point and the 2-point together. Feel free to stop now and go ahead and find the link for your first 1-point practice.